sound of a single, resonant bell ringing, fading into the background. Have you ever heard a sound that seems to echo through time itself? A sound so profound, it carries the weight of history in its vibrations. Imagine it's the dead of night, back in the 18th century. The air is still, the world is quiet, and then that single, clear tone rings out. What did that sound mean to the people who first heard it? Was it a call to gather? A warning? Or was it something more? Ah, promise. Today. Today, we re-embarking on a journey to explore one of the most iconic symbols of liberty in the world, the Liberty Bell. But this isn't just a story about a cracked piece of bronze. It's a story about an idea so powerful it could unite a fledgling nation, inspire generations, and echo the promise of freedom across centuries. This bell has seen revolution. It has witnessed the birth of a nation, and has stood as a silent sentinel through its greatest trials and triumphs. Its story is woven into the very fabric of America. We often see it on postcards or in history books, a silent, static relic. But what if we could listen closer? What if we could hear the stories it has to tell? The journey of the Liberty Bell begins not in a moment of triumph, but with a simple order for a bell to hang in a state house. No one could have predicted that this humble instrument would become a global emblem of independence and human rights. It was ordered to commemorate the 50th anniversary of William Penn's 1701 Charter of Privileges, Pennsylvania's original constitution. The words inscribed upon it were chosen with incredible foresight. A quote from Leviticus: "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." Think about that for a moment. Before there was a United States, before the Declaration of Independence was even a whisper on the wind, the ideal of liberty was being cast in metal, ready to be announced to the world. It was a bold statement, a declaration of intent. This land was to be different. It was to be a place where the rights of the individual were paramount. But the bell's journey was far from smooth. In fact, it was fraught with imperfection from the very beginning. When the bell arrived from London in 1752, it cracked on the very first test ring. A bad omen, perhaps. Some thought so. But instead of sending it back, a group of local craftsmen, John Pass and John Stowe, decided to fix it. They melted it down and recast it. Not once, but twice. This act of persistence, of taking something broken and making it anew, is a powerful metaphor for the nation it would come to represent. It's a story of resilience, of a determination to create something lasting, even in the face of initial failure. This recast bell is the one we know today. It rang 4 years, calling lawmakers to their meetings and citizens to hear the news. It rang to mark important events, its voice becoming a familiar part of life in colonial Philadelphia. And then came the moment that would forever seal its destiny. While the story of the bell ringing on July 4th, 1776, to announce the signing of the Declaration of Independence, is a beloved piece of American folklore, historical records suggest it likely didn't happen exactly that way. The steeple was in poor condition, and the official announcement wasn't made until July 8th. On that day, the bell did ring, along with other church bells throughout the city, to call the people of Philadelphia to the State House yard. There, the Declaration of Independence was read aloud for the first time in public. Can you imagine the atmosphere of that day? The excitement, the fear, the incredible hope. As the words of Jefferson echoed through the square, we hold these truths to be that all men are created equal. The bell's chime wasn't just marking the time, it was punctuating a turning point in human history. It was the sound of a new idea taking flight, the sound of a people claiming their own destiny. The inscription, once just a hopeful quote, was now a revolutionary decree. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land. And on that day, it did. The bell became a symbol of the revolution, a rallying cry for the patriots fighting for their newfound independence. When the British threatened to capture Philadelphia in 1777, the bell was carefully hidden away, smuggled out of the city in a convoy of farm wagons and concealed under the floorboards of a church in Allentown. They knew its symbolic power. To let it fall into enemy hands would have been a devastating blow to morale. Protecting the bell was like protecting the very spirit of the revolution. After the war, the bell returned to its home in the State House, later renamed Independence Hall. It continued its duties, ringing for civic events and holidays, but its voice was growing fragile. Years of ringing had taken their toll, and a thin crack began to appear. The famous, jagged crack we see today likely formed sometime in the early 1840s. The final time it ever rang was in February 1846, for George Washington's birthday celebration. An attempt to repair the existing crack unfortunately silenced it forever. But silence did not diminish its power. In fact, it may have amplified it. The bell's story took on a new chapter. It was no longer just a functional object. It became a revered relic. In the mid-19th century, as the nation grappled with the profound moral crisis of slavery, abolitionists adopted the bell as their symbol. They were the ones who first called it the Liberty Bell. They pointed to its inscription and its cracked, silenced state as a powerful metaphor for a nation that proclaimed liberty for all, yet held millions in bondage. It became a potent symbol in the fight for abolition, a constant, silent reminder of America's unfinished promise. After the Civil War, the Liberty Bell began to travel. It was sent across the country on trains, making stops in cities large and small. It journeyed to New Orleans, Chicago, Atlanta, and San Francisco. For millions of Americans who would never visit Philadelphia, it was a chance to see a tangible piece of their nation's history. These Liberty Bell tours were a phenomenal success, helping to heal the wounds of the Civil War and unite the country under a shared symbol of freedom and patriotism. It became an American icon, a touchstone for a nation forging a new identity. As the 20th century dawned, its symbolism continued to evolve. During World War I, its image was used on Liberty Loan posters to encourage citizens to support the war effort. Suffragettes invoked its spirit in their fight for the right to vote, creating a Justice Bell, a replica of the Liberty Bell whose clapper was chained to its side, to remain silent until women won the franchise. When it was finally unchained in 1920, it was a powerful echo of the original bell's promise. From the civil rights movement of the 1960s to protests for democracy around the globe, the Liberty Bell has been a beacon of hope for all people striving for freedom. Martin Luther King Jr. famously referenced it in his "I Have a Dream" speech, calling to let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia, ... Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. His words transformed the bell from a national symbol into a universal one, its echo reaching far beyond the borders of the United States. Today, the Liberty Bell rests in its own dedicated center across from Independence Hall, visited by millions each year. Its seat, very silent and fractured, yet its message is louder than ever. It's a reminder that liberty is not a given. It's fragile. It must be defended, fought for, and extended to every single person. The crack is not a sign of failure, but a testament to its journey. It represents the stresses and strains a free society endures, the ongoing struggle to live up to its highest ideals. It reminds us that our work is never truly done. The bell's story is our story. It's a story of high ideals and human imperfection, of triumphant breakthroughs and painful struggles. It is the echo of a promise made over 2 centuries ago, a promise that continues to resonate today. It challenges each of us to ask what liberty for all really means, and what our role is in making that promise a reality. Its silence speaks volumes, inviting us to listen not with our ears, but with our hearts, to the enduring echo of freedom. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the story of the Liberty Bell. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the symbols that shape our world. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What does the Liberty Bell mean to you? Until next time, keep exploring. Welcome back to our journey through history. Last time, we left the seeds of revolution sprouting across the colonies. Today, we arrive in the heart of it all. This is Chapter 2, A City Awaits. The year is 1776. The place, Philadelphia. This isn't just any city. It's the largest in British North America, a bustling hub of commerce, ideas, and, now, simmering rebellion. Imagine yourself walking these cobblestone streets. The air itself feels different, heavy with the humid Philadelphia summer. but also charged with something else, an electric anticipation. It's a city holding its breath. Look around. The architecture speaks of order and prosperity. Stately brick buildings, like the Georgian masterpiece Carpenter's Hall, line the streets, just a stone's throw away. The Pennsylvania State House stands proudly, its bell tower reaching for the sky. But inside these respectable buildings, the conversations are anything but ordinary. They are revolutionary. Let's step into a local tavern, something like the City Tavern, a popular meeting spot. The clatter of tankards and the low hum of conversation fill the room. But listen closely. The talk isn't just about shipping schedules or the price of tobacco anymore. Lean in, and you'll hear snippets whispered from table to table. Did you hear about the delegates? One man murmurs to his companion, glancing over his shoulder. They say Jefferson has drafted something bold. Another group in the corner debates heatedly. Independence, it's madness. We are Englishmen, a merchant exclaims, his face flushed. A younger man, perhaps an artisan or a clerk, counters, Englishman with no voice. How long must we bow to a king an ocean away? These aren't just idle chats. These are the sounds of a nation being born in real time. In the taverns and coffee houses, on the street corners and in the drawing rooms of Philadelphia. The city is a melting pot, not just of people, but of radical, world-changing ideas. Pamphlets are passed from hand to hand, their ink still fresh. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, published just months earlier, is the talk of the town. It's powerful. Plain language has set minds ablaze, turning the abstract idea of independence into a tangible, achievable goal. It's being read aloud in public squares, its arguments dissected and debated by everyone from dock workers to delegates. The tension is palpable. British soldiers, the so-called redcoats, are a less common sight here than in Boston, but their presence is felt. Every ship that arrives in the port brings news and rumors from the other colonies, from London, from the battlefronts. News of skirmishes, of victories and defeats, travels fast, fueling both hope and fear. Families are divided. Friends become political adversaries. The decision to support the crown or the cause of independence is a deeply personal and dangerous one. Choosing the wrong side could mean losing your property, your freedom, or even your life. Yet, amidst the anxiety, there's an undeniable undercurrent of hope. It's a powerful, infectious optimism. You see it in the eyes of the young apprentices discussing liberty in the determined set of a delegate's jaw as he walks towards the State House, and in the quiet resolve of the women who are managing households and businesses, while the men are drawn into the political fray. They are all part of this moment. They feel that they are on the cusp of something monumental, something that has never been done before. They are not just colonists anymore. They are beginning to see themselves as American. The delegates of the Second Continental Congress are the focal point of this entire drama. Men like John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson are not just historical figures to the people of Philadelphia. They are their neighbors. They are the men seen walking down Chestnut Street, wrestling with the weight of an entire continent's future on their shoulders. The windows of the State House are shut tight against the summer heat and prying ears. But the city knows that behind those closed doors, the fate of 13 colonies is being decided. Every citizen, every shopkeeper, every child playing in the street is a spectator to history in the making. They are waiting for a word, a sign, a declaration that will change their world forever. The air is thick with questions. Will they do it? Will they truly declare independence? What will happen if they do? Can a collection of disparate colonies really stand against the might of the British Empire? The whispers grow louder, the rumors more intense. The suspense builds with each passing day, each sweltering hour. Philadelphia, in the summer of 1776, is more than just a place on a map. It's a stage, and the curtain is about to rise on one of the most significant acts in human history. The city and the world awaits. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. The story is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens next. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, please give this video a thumbs up, and make sure you resubscribed with notifications turned on so you do UNT miss Chapter 3. We do love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Hello, history buffs, and welcome back to our deep dive into the story of America's most famous bell. In our last chapter, we saw the bell in its current home, a symbol recognized around the world. But how did it all begin? Let's turn back the clock for Chapter 3. The birth of a bell. Our story starts not with a crack, but with a commission. The year is 1751, and the Pennsylvania Provincial Assembly, the governing body of the colony, has a brilliant idea. They want to commemorate a truly significant milestone. The 50th anniversary of William Penn's 1701 Charter of Privileges. Now, this wasn't just any old document. William Penn's charter was revolutionary for its time. It was a blueprint for a government that guaranteed religious freedom and protected individual liberties. Imagine that. In an era when monarchs and state-sponsored churches held immense power, Pennsylvania was a beacon of tolerance and progressive governance. This charter laid the groundwork for many of the freedoms that Americans would later fight for and cherish. So, the Assembly needed something special to honor this 50-year legacy of liberty. A statue. A painting. No, they decided on something that could be heard. Something that could ring out and remind every citizen of their precious rights. They decided on a bell. This bell was meant to be more than just a timekeeper or a fire alarm. It was commissioned as a living, breathing symbol of the principles William Penn had established. It was a celebration of a half-century of freedom in a world where such freedom was rare. The Assembly envisioned a grand bell, one that would hang in their new state house, the very building we now know as Independence Hall. To get the best, they looked across the Atlantic. They placed an order with the well-respected Whitechapel Bell Foundry in London, the same firm that would later cast Big Ben. The instructions were specific. They wanted a bell of about 2,000 pounds. And most importantly, they wanted it to carry an inscription. This is where the story gets truly prophetic. The Speaker of the Assembly, Isaac Norris, chose a powerful verse from the Bible, from Leviticus chapter 25. Verse 10 it reads, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." Think about the weight of those words in 1751. The American Revolution was still decades away. The idea of a unified independent nation was not even a whisper on most people's lips. Yet, here was this inscription, chosen to honor a charter of privileges, literally casting the word liberty in bronze. It was as if they were planting a seed, embedding a promise into the very metal of the bell. This inscription wasn't about breaking away from England at the time. For the Assembly, liberty meant the specific freedoms granted by Penn's charter, the right to worship freely, the right to a trial by jury, the right to have a voice in their own governance. The bell was a monument to the enlightened society they were building in Pennsylvania, a society founded on principles of justice and tolerance. So, the order was placed, and the craftsmen at Whitechapel got to work. They melted the copper and tin, poured the molten metal into a massive mold, and carefully inscribed those visionary words onto its surface. After months of painstaking work, the bell was complete. It was a magnificent creation, ready to embark on a long sea voyage from London to Philadelphia. The colonists waited with great anticipation. This wasn't just a piece of metal. It was their new voice. It was the sound of their freedom, a testament to their unique heritage. They imagined it ringing out from the State House steeple, its powerful tone echoing through the bustling streets of Philadelphia, a constant reminder of the ideals that bound them together. Little did they know, the journey of this bell was just beginning, and its first moments in the New World would be far from the triumphant debut they had all envisioned. The bell that was meant to proclaim liberty would soon face its own first test, a trial by fire, or rather a trial by strife that would forever alter its destiny and set it on the path to becoming the legendary icon we know today. The ship carrying this symbol of hope was on its way, and with it, the next chapter of our story. What happened when the bell finally arrived in Philadelphia? The answer might surprise you, and it's a crucial part of its legend. Join us next time as we uncover the disastrous first ring and the ingenious fix that gave the Liberty Bell its unique voice. Thanks so much for watching. If you're enjoying this journey through history, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single chapter. We'll see you next time. Welcome back to our journey through history. In today's chapter, we're diving deep into the craftsmanship, the very metal behind the Liberty Bell. It's a story of ambition, failure, and remarkable redemption. Our story begins across the Atlantic, in London, at the renowned Whitechapel Bell Foundry. The year is 1751. The Pennsylvania Provincial Assembly, wanting to commemorate the 50th anniversary of William Penn's Democratic Charter, places an order for a magnificent bell. They chose the firm of Lester and Pack, masters of their craft, to cast a bell that would ring out for generations. The instructions were clear. Create a 2,000-pound bell, and inscribe upon it a powerful verse from Leviticus. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. After a long and arduous sea voyage, the massive bronze bell arrived in Philadelphia in August 1752. Imagine the excitement. The city gathered, eager to hear the first peal of their new symbol. But as the bell was being tested, just a single strike of the clapper was all it took for disaster to strike. A deafening, jarring sound, not a clear, resonant tone. A thin, jagged crack had appeared, running up the side of the brand-new bell. The city's high hopes were shattered, just like the bell itself. The London-made masterpiece was a failure. What a disappointment. Sending the bell all the way back to England would be a logistical nightmare, taking months, if not years. The people of Philadelphia were impatient. They needed a bell for their state house, and they needed it soon. So, the assembly turned to two local founders, two men who had never cast a bell of this size or importance before. Their names were John Pass and John Stowe. They were described as two ingenious workmen, but let's be honest, they were facing an immense challenge. Pass and Stowe took on the monumental task. Their first step was to break the original bell into smaller pieces. They then melted these pieces down in their foundry. To make the metal less brittle, they added about 100 pounds of copper to the alloy. They believed this would strengthen the bell and give it a better tone. Full of hope, they poured the molten bronze into a new mold, creating the first American-made version of the bell. Once, it called the moment of truth arrived again. The city held its breath as the newly cast bell was hoisted and rung. Terresul? Well, it didn't crack, which was a definite improvement. But the sound was not great. One observer harshly described its tone as being like two coal scuttles being banged together. It was a dull, unpleasant clang, far from the beautiful, clear ring they had envisioned. The public was unimpressed, and the assembly was displeased. Pass and Stowe, despite their best efforts, had to go back to the drawing board. Undeterred by the criticism, Pass and Stowe decided to try again. They were determined to get it right. Once more, they broke their own creation apart, melting it down for a second time. This time, they adjusted their formula again, though the exact changes they made have been lost to history. They likely tinkered with the ratio of copper and tin. Drawing on the hard lessons learned from their first attempt, they recast the bell for a third and final time. This bell, the one that emerged from their furnace in June 1753, is the very same Liberty Bell we know and revere today. This new bell was finally installed in the State House steeple, and its sound, it was deemed acceptable. Not perfect, perhaps, but good enough. It finally had a voice. For the next 2 decades, this bell, born from failure and persistence, served its purpose. It rang to call lawmakers to their sessions, to alert citizens to public announcements, and to summon the people of Philadelphia together for important events. It wasn't yet the Liberty Bell, but it was a functional, respected part of daily life in the thriving colonial city. The craftsmanship of 2 determined local artisans had finally given Philadelphia its voice. Isn't that an incredible story of perseverance? From a cracked London original to the determined efforts of 2 local founders who just wouldn't quit. It shows that sometimes the greatest things are born not from initial perfection, but from the refusal to accept failure. In our next chapter, we'll explore how this ordinary State House bell began its transformation into an extraordinary symbol of freedom. Thank you so much for joining me for this part of the story. If you're enjoying this series, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. See you next time. Hello and welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we're diving deep into the very soul of the Liberty Bell, exploring the powerful words that have echoed through centuries and defined a nation. Let's talk about the inscription. Cast into the bronze surface of the bell are these immortal words: "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land and to all the inhabitants thereof." It's a phrase most of us have heard, a line synonymous with American freedom. But have you ever wondered where it came from? It wasn't penned by a founding father or a revolutionary poet. These words are much, much older. They come from the Bible, specifically from the book of Leviticus, chapter 25, verse 10. This verse is part of a larger set of instructions for the year of Jubilee, a special year that was to be observed every 50 years. In the year of Jubilee, debts were forgiven, slaves were freed, and land was returned to its original owners. It was a time of resetting, of restoration, and of profound liberation for everyone. The sound of a horn, or a shofar, was meant to proclaim liberty across the land, signaling the start of this incredible year of renewal. So, why was this specific verse chosen for a bell in colonial Pennsylvania in 1751? To understand that, we need to look at the man who likely chose it. Isaac Norris, the Speaker of the Pennsylvania Assembly. Norris was a Quaker, a member of a religious group known for its strong beliefs in social justice, equality, and pacifism. For Quakers, liberty wasn't just about political freedom from a king. It was about spiritual and personal liberty. It was about the freedom of conscience to worship as one saw fit, a principle upon which Pennsylvania itself was founded by William Penn. When the Pennsylvania Assembly ordered this bell to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Penn's 1701 Charter o Privilegiasa, foundational document for the colony that guaranteed religious freedom, this verse from Leviticus was the perfect choice. It beautifully captured the spirit of renewal, justice, and the freedom that Penn and the Quakers had worked so hard to establish in their holy experiment of a colony. The bell was meant to celebrate a jubilee of their own cherished liberties. At the time it was cast, no one could have imagined the global significance these words would one day hold. The bell, originally known simply as the State House Bell, rang for various civic events, calling lawmakers to meetings and citizens to hear news. It was a local symbol for a local purpose. The idea of a full-blown revolution against Great Britain was not yet on the horizon for most people, but history has a funny way of giving new meaning to old symbols. As tensions with Britain grew in the 1760s and 1770s, the concept of liberty began to shift. It evolved from a colonial right to a universal human right. The colonists started to see themselves not just as Englishmen fighting for their rights, but as a new people fighting for the freedom to govern themselves. While the story that the bell rang on July 4th, 1776, to announce the Declaration of Independence, is likely a myth popularized later, the bell's inscription perfectly captured the spirit of the moment. The Declaration itself was a proclamation of liberty throughout the land. It announced to the world that these colonies were now free and independent states. The bell, with its biblical call for freedom, became the unofficial voice of this new, radical idea. It symbolized the promise that this new nation was making not just to its own people, but to the entire world. The true transformation of the bell into a national icon, however, happened much later, in the 19th century. This is where the story gets really interesting. In the 1830s, the abolitionist movement, the movement to end slavery, was gaining momentum. Abolitionists were searching for a powerful symbol to represent their cause, their fight for the freedom of millions of enslaved people. They found it in the old State House Bell. They seized upon its inscription: "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." They argued that the promise of America, the promise written right on the bell, had not been fulfilled. How could a nation claim to be the land of the free when millions of its inhabitants were in chains? It was the abolitionists who first widely called it the Liberty Bell. They printed its image in their pamphlets and newspapers, often showing it cracked, symbolizing a broken nation that had failed to live up to its founding ideals. The inscription was no longer just a historical quote. It became a moral challenge, a rallying cry for justice. It was a constant, bronze reminder that the work of proclaiming liberty was far from finished. It demanded that the promise of freedom be extended to all inhabitants, just as the verse commanded. This reframing was incredibly powerful. It took a symbol of the nation's founding and turned it into a critique of the nation's greatest sin. The bell's message became a cornerstone of the fight for abolition, influencing public opinion and giving the movement a symbol that was both deeply patriotic and profoundly radical. After the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, the Liberty Bell's journey continued. It became a symbol of unity and reconciliation. It was sent on tours across the country, where millions of people, from all walks of life, could see it up close. For new immigrants, it represented the promise of a new life in a free country. During the women's suffrage movement, activists created a justice bell, a replica of the Liberty Bell, whose clapper was chained to its side. They vowed it would not ring until women had the right to vote, once again invoking the bell's inscription to demand that liberty be extended to all. Throughout the 20th century, during world wars, the Cold War, and the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, the bell and its inscription were there. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. and other civil rights leaders masterfully used the rhetoric of American liberty to demand an end to segregation and discrimination. The phrase "proclaim liberty" was a direct challenge to the injustices of their time. The bell's message proved to be timeless, adapting to each generation's struggle for a more perfect union. So, when we look at the Liberty Bell today, we're seeing so much more than an old, cracked piece of bronze. We're seeing a story that is constantly being written. The inscription is a living document. It started as a biblical instruction for a year of Jubilee, was chosen to celebrate religious freedom in a single colony, became the anthem for a revolution, served as the conscience of a nation in the fight against slavery, and continues to inspire movements for justice and equality to this day. It reminds us that liberty is not a destination we have reached, but a continuous act, a promise that each generation must strive to fulfill. It is a proclamation that must be made again and again for all inhabitants, without exception. The simple words cast in metal over 270 years ago have become the enduring, resonant, and beautifully challenging heartbeat of an entire nation's ideals. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the Liberty Bell's inscription. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more chapters of our shared history. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we're diving into a period of profound change, a time when the seeds of revolution were sown across the 13 American colonies. This is Chapter 6, The Gathering Storm. Imagine the atmosphere in the mid-18th century. Life in the colonies was a blend of hardship and opportunity. People had carved out new lives far from their ancestral homes, building communities, farms, and businesses. They considered themselves loyal British subjects, proud of their shared heritage and the freedoms they believed were their birthright. Yet, a shadow was beginning to fall across this relationship. A shadow cast all the way from London. The 7 Years' War, known as the French and Indian War in America, had been a costly victory for the British Empire. To manage the massive war debt and the expense of administering its vast new territories, the British government turned its eyes to the colonies. From their perspective, it was only fair. The war had been fought, in large part to protect the colonists. So shouldn't they help pay for it? This logic led to a series of acts that would ignite a firestorm of protest. It began subtly, with the Sugar Act of 1764, which, while actually lowering the tax on molasses, increased enforcement, disrupting the colonial trade that had often sidestepped such duties. Then came the real shockwave, the Stamp Act of 1765. This was different. This wasn't a tax on trade. It was a direct tax on the colonists themselves. Newspapers, legal documents, playing cards, virtually any piece of paper had to carry an official stamp for which a tax was paid. The reaction was immediate and fierce. The cry of no taxation without representation echoed from the bustling ports of Boston to the rural farmlands of Georgia. Colonists argued that they had no representatives in the British Parliament. Therefore, Parliament had no right to levy direct taxes on them. This was a fundamental violation of their rights as Englishmen. Protests erupted. Groups like the Sons of Liberty formed, organizing boycotts of British goods. Stamp distributors were intimidated into resigning. The economic pressure was immense. British merchants, seeing their profits plummet, pleaded with Parliament to reconsider. In 1766, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act, and a wave of relief swept through the colonies. Celebrations were held, and it seemed the crisis was over. But on the very same day, Parliament passed the Declaratory Act. This act was a quiet but firm assertion of power. It stated that Parliament had the authority to make laws for the colonies in all cases whatsoever. The storm had not passed. It had merely paused. The calm was short-lived. In 1767, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Charles Townshend, introduced a new set of taxes, the Townshend Acts. These were import duties on goods like glass, lead, paint, paper, and, most famously, tea. Once again, the colonial response was swift. Boycotts were renewed with even greater determination. Colonial women, calling themselves the Daughters of Liberty, played a crucial role, organizing spinning bees to produce homespun cloth as an alternative to British textiles. This was more than just an economic protest. It was a powerful statement of self-reliance. Tensions escalated, particularly in Boston, which had become the epicenter of colonial resistance, to enforce the unpopular laws and quell the unrest. Britain sent troops to the city in 1768. The presence of redcoats on the streets was a constant source of friction. Locals saw them as an occupying army, and confrontations between soldiers and civilians became common. This simmering hostility boiled over on a cold March evening in 1770. A crowd gathered, taunting a British sentry. More soldiers arrived, and the situation spiraled out of control. In the confusion, the soldiers fired into the crowd. When the smoke cleared, 5 colonists lay dead or dying. This event, immortalized by Paul Revere's dramatic engraving, became known as the Boston Massacre. It was a shocking moment that sent waves of horror throughout the colonies, painting the British as brutal tyrants. In the wake of the massacre, Parliament, facing renewed pressure, repealed most of the Townshend duties except for one. They kept the tax on tea. This was a symbolic gesture, a lingering reminder of Parliament's claimed authority. For a few years, an uneasy truce settled and many colonists, weary of the conflict, went back to their daily lives, drinking smuggled Dutch tea to avoid the tax. But the storm was not over. In 1773, the British government passed the Tea Act. This act wasn't designed to raise new taxes, but to save the struggling British East India Company. It allowed the company to sell its tea directly to the colonies, bypassing colonial merchants and making its tea cheaper than even the smuggled alternatives. The tax remained, but the overall price was lower. London thought this was a clever solution. The colonists would get cheap tea, the East India Company would be saved, and the principle of parliamentary taxation would be upheld. They were wrong. The colonists saw it as a trick, a deceptive attempt to make them accept the tax. They weren't just concerned about the price of tea. They were defending a principle. If they accepted this, what would be next? In ports like Charleston and Philadelphia, the tea ships were turned away. But in Boson, the royal governor, Thomas Hutchinson, was determined that the tea would be unloaded and the tax paid. The Sons of Liberty saw only one path forward. On the night of December 16, 1773, a group of men, disguised as Mohawk Indians, boarded the 3 tea ships docked in the harbor. In a silent, determined act of defiance, they smashed open 342 chests tea and dumped the valuable cargo into the water. This was the Boston Tea Party. The news of this audacious act of destruction stunned London. From the British perspective, this was not protest. It was vandalism. It was a direct challenge to their authority that could not be ignored. Their response would be swift and severe, pushing the colonies from discontent to the brink of open rebellion. All this time high in the Pennsylvania State House, the bell we'd been following remained silent. Its inscription proclaimed liberty throughout all the land, was a promise yet to be fulfilled. But with every new tax, every protest, every call for self-governance, the day it would ring out was drawing closer. The storm had gathered, and the winds of change were about to become a hurricane. The colonies in Britain were on a collision course, and the world was about to be changed forever. Thank you so much for joining me today as we explored this critical chapter. The story is far from over, and the most dramatic events are yet to come. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue the journey, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. We'll see you next time. Imagine this. It's July 2nd, 1776. The air in Philadelphia is thick with summer heat and something even heavier. Revolution. Revolution. We're stepping inside the Pennsylvania State House, a building the world will soon know as Independence Hall. Forget the quiet, museum-like space you might picture today. This room is alive, buzzing with tension and the low hum of anxious voices. 56 men, delegates of the Second Continental Congress, are gathered here. They've come from 13 distinct colonies, each with its own interests, fears, and hopes. But today, they face a single, monumental question. Should they sever ties with the most powerful empire on earth? Let's look around. You can see the faces, etched with the weight of their decision. John Adams of Massachusetts, fiery and relentless, has been pushing for this moment for months. He sees independence not as a choice, but as a destiny, a truth waiting to be declared. His arguments are sharp, passionate, and unyielding. He believes that to hesitate now is to condemn future generations to tyranny. You can almost feel the force of his conviction, a wave of energy washing over the room. He's not just giving a speech. He's trying to will a nation into existence. But not everyone is convinced. Across the room sits John Dickinson of Pennsylvania. He's often called the penman of the Revolution for his eloquent writings, but now he urges caution. He's not a loyalist, not by a long shot. He loves liberty as much as anyone here, but he fears the consequences of a premature break. He paints a grim picture. A bloody, devastating war against an unmatched military, the potential for civil war among the colonies themselves, and the risk of trading one master for a dozen worse ones, if they fall into anarchy, or picked off by other European powers. His arguments are sober, logical, and filled with a genuine concern for the lives that will be lost. He's pleading for one last attempt at reconciliation, a final olive branch. It's a battle of head versus heart, of pragmatism versus idealism, playing out in real time. Feel the atmosphere. The windows are likely closed to ensure secrecy, making the room stuffy and suffocating. Outside, the world goes on, but inside this chamber, a new world is being debated. Delegates are whispering in small groups. Benjamin Franklin, the eldest statesman, watches with his famous knowing calm, occasionally offering a piece of wisdom or a witty remark to cut through the tension. Thomas Jefferson, the young Virginian, is mostly silent. His work is already done. His powerfully worded draft of a declaration sits on the table, a document that gives voice to the very ideals they are arguing over. He's written that all men are created equal, endowed with rights to life, liberty, in the pursuit of happiness. But these are just words on paper until the men in this room vote to make them the foundation of a new country. The debate rages for hours. Voices rise and fall. Alliances shift. Men who were friends find themselves on opposite sides. The delegates from South Carolina, led by Edward Rutledge, are hesitant. They worry about the economic impact, their reliance on trade with Britain, and the deeply troubling issue of slavery, which Jefferson's draft initially condemned. The New York delegation is in a bind. They haven't received instructions from their home colony and must abstain, their silence amplifying the tension. Every vote is critical. A declaration without unanimous support would be a sign of weakness, an invitation for Britain to divide and conquer. Unity is everything. Suddenly, a rider arrives, mud-spattered and exhausted. It's Caesar Rodney of Delaware. He had been 80 miles away, sick in bed, but rode through the night in a thunderstorm after learning that Delaware's vote was deadlocked. His dramatic arrival, just in the nick of time, breaks the stalemate for his colony, casting a crucial vote in favor of independence. This single act of dedication shows just how much is at stake for these individuals. It's a moment of pure cinematic drama, a testament to the personal sacrifices being made. As the day wears on, the tide begins to turn. The power of Adams's arguments, the quiet dignity of Franklin, the inspiring words of Jefferson's text, and the sheer momentum of events push the delegates toward a consensus. John Dickinson, seeing he cannot win the argument and unwilling to stand in the way of what now seems inevitable, makes a profound choice. He decides to absent himself from the final vote. It's an act of quiet patriotism. He cannot in good conscience vote for independence, but he will not vote against it and shatter the illusion of unity the colonies so desperately need. Finally, the question is called. The secretary, Charles Thompson, records the vote, colony by colony, one by one. They answer. Pennsylvania. Its internal divisions resolved. Votes. Yes. South Carolina, swayed by the need for a united front, joins the majority. In the end, 12 colonies vote in favor. New York still abstains, but will join them a few days later. It is done. On July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress officially votes for independence. The formal document, Jefferson's Declaration, will be edited and formally adopted 2 days later, on Juli 4. But the decision, the true break from Britain, happens right here, on this sweltering Tuesday. Think about the courage it took. These men were not declaring independence from a distant, faceless government. They were committing treason against their king. They were signing their own death warrants. They were lawyers, merchants, and farmers who were risking everything, their property, their families, and their lives on an idea. An idea that a government's power should come from the consent of the governed. As the delegates file out of the hall into the evening air, the mood is not one of wild celebration. It's one of solemn resolve. They have crossed a threshold from which there is no return. The debate is over, but the war, the real test of their conviction, has just begun. They have just voted a new nation into existence, and now they have to fight for it. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back in time. It's in these moments of intense debate and personal courage that history is truly forged. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What part of this story stood out to you the most? Until next time, stay curious. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the American Revolution. When we last left off, the air in Philadelphia was thick with anticipation. The final debates had been made. The passionate speeches had been delivered. And now, the moment of truth was upon the delegates of the Second Continental Congress. This is the story of the day freedom was chosen. This is Chapter 8. The Vote for Freedom. Imagine the scene. It's July 1st, 1776. The Congress reconvenes as a committee of the whole to consider Richard Henry Lee's resolution for independence. The mood is incredibly tense. This isn't just a political debate, it's a matter of life and death. A vote for independence is an act of treason against the British Crown, a point of no return. Every man in that room knew that if they failed, a hangman's noose likely awaited them. The weight of a nation's future rested squarely on their shoulders. In this initial, unofficial tally, the vote was closer than you might think. 9 colonies voted in favor. Pennsylvania and South Carolina voted against it. Delaware's delegation was split, with only 2 of its 3 delegates present, leaving them deadlocked. And New York, still awaiting instructions from its provincial Congress, abstained. The resolution had support, but it wasn't unanimous. Unanimity was the goal. To present a fractured front to the world and to Great Britain would be a disastrous start for a new nation. The delegates, particularly supporters of independence like John Adams, knew they had one night to change minds, to forge unity from division. Edward Rutledge of South Carolina, a vocal opponent, asked for the final, official vote to be postponed until the next day. Juli 2, he hoped that by then, the delegates could come to a unanimous decision, one way or another. The postponement was granted. That night was one of the most crucial in American history. It was a night of intense lobbying, of earnest conversations in taverns and boarding houses across Philadelphia. Men like Adams, Franklin, and Jefferson would have been working tirelessly, appealing to reason, to shared grievances, and to the grand vision of a self-governing republic. They argued that reconciliation with Britain was a fantasy, that King George III was a tyrant, and that the only path forward was to sever the ties completely. The delegation from South Carolina was a key focus. Edward Rutledge and his colleagues were conservative by nature, worried about the economic and social upheaval that independence might bring, especially for the Southern colony's plantation economy. But they were also patriots. The arguments for a united front must have weighed heavily on them. They had to decide if their regional concerns were more important than the collective cause of all 13 colonies. Then there was Pennsylvania. The delegation was divided, with figures like John Dickinson leading the opposition. Dickinson was a brilliant lawyer and a patriot, but he was cautious. He argued passionately that the colonies were not ready for independence, that they lacked the military strength and the foreign alliances necessary to win a war against the mightiest empire on earth. He believed a declaration of independence at this stage was like sending a ship into a storm without a rudder. His arguments were powerful and swayed many, but the most dramatic story of that night involves Delaware. The delegation was split between Thomas McKean, who was for independence, and George Reed, who was against it. The tie-breaking vote belonged to the third delegate, Caesar Rodney. The problem: Rodney was 80 miles away, at his home near Dover, suffering from a severe bout of asthma and facial cancer. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Thomas McKean dispatched an urgent message to Rodney, begging him to ride to Philadelphia immediately. And so, Caesar Rodney embarked on one of the most legendary journeys in American history. Through a dark and stormy night, battling his illnesses, he rode relentlessly on horseback. He galloped through thunder, lightning, and pouring rain, covering the 80 miles in record time. His only thought was to get to the State House in time to cast his vote for the future of his country. So, we arrive at the morning of July 2nd, 1776. The delegates filed back into the assembly room. The final vote is called "The Roll Call Begins," colony by colony, from north to south. When Delaware's turn comes, Caesar Rodney, mud-spattered, exhausted, but resolute, strides into the hall. His dramatic, last-minute arrival broke the deadlock in his delegation, tipping Delaware's vote in favor of independence. Then came the turn of South Carolina. After a night of soul-searching, Edward Rutledge and his delegation had a change of heart. Recognizing the absolute necessity of unity, they decided to vote yes for the good of the whole continent. Finally, there was Pennsylvania. John Dickinson, ever a man of principle, realized that while he could not in good conscience vote for independence, he would not stand in the way of the majority. In an incredible act of patriotic sacrifice, he and Robert Morris, another opponent, chose to abstain by simply not attending the session. Their absence allowed the remaining Pennsylvania delegates to cast the colony's vote in favor of independence. With New York still abstaining, the final tally was 12 in favor, 0 against, and 1 abstention. It was done. On July 2nd, 1776, the Second Continental Congress officially and decisively voted to sever all political ties with Great Britain. John Adams, in a letter to his wife Abigail, wrote with prophetic insight, "The second day of July 1776 will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival." He was off by 2 days. Of course, as we celebrate on the 4th, the day the text of the Declaration was approved, but the pivotal decision, the true legislative birth of the United States, happened on July 2nd. As news of the vote spread, preparations were made. In the belfry of the Pennsylvania State House, now known as Independence Hall, sat a massive bell. It had been commissioned decades earlier and was inscribed with a fitting verse from Leviticus: "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land and to all the inhabitants thereof." This bell, which we now call the Liberty Bell, was prepared. Though historical accounts differ on whether it rang on July 4th or a few days later on July 8th when the Declaration was first read publicly, its symbolism was undeniable. It was waiting to announce to the world that a new nation, conceived in liberty, had been born. The vote was a monumental gamble, an act of collective courage that is almost impossible to fully appreciate today. These men, from different backgrounds and with different interests, chose to risk everything: their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for an idea. The idea that people have the right to govern themselves. With that vote, the 13 colonies ceased to be colonies. They became free and independent states. The war was no longer a rebellion for rights as British subjects. It was now a war for national survival. Thank you so much for joining us for this pivotal chapter. The vote was cast, but the words that would inspire the world were yet to be fully embraced. In our next episode, we will dive deep into the text of the Declaration of Independence itself, exploring a document that changed the course of human history. If you found this story as inspiring as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what comes next. Don't forget to ring that notification bell too. We love hearing from you, so please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. July 4th, 1776. This date is etched into the heart of a nation, celebrated with fireworks and parades. But what was it really like on that fateful Thursday in Philadelphia? Let's travel back in time, not just to the date, but to the very room where history was being written, where the air was thick with humidity, anticipation, and the weight of a monumental decision. The story of the Declaration of Independence isn't just about a document. It's about the final, nail-biting hours that forged a new world. Just 2 days earlier, on Juli 2, the Second Continental Congress had taken a radical leap. They had voted in favor of independence from Great Britain. John Adams, in a letter to his wife Abigail, was ecstatic, declaring that July 2nd would be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. He envisioned future generations celebrating with pomp and parade. Games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations. He was right about the celebrations, just off by a couple of days. The vote was the what. Now, they needed the why. They needed to tell the world, and their own people, exactly what this separation stood for. That why was the document sitting on the table, a draft penned primarily by a young, red-headed Virginian named Thomas Jefferson. For weeks, Jefferson had toiled. He was part of the Committee of Five, which also included heavyweights like John Adams and Benjamin Franklin. But the task of drafting the initial text fell to him. Working in a rented room, he wrote and rewrote, striving to capture the spirit of the American mind. He wasn't trying to invent brand new ideas. Instead, as he later said, he wanted to offer an expression of the American mind and to place before mankind the common sense of the subject. In terms so plain and firm as to command their assent, he drew upon the philosophies of John Locke and the Enlightenment thinkers, weaving their ideas about natural rights into the fabric of a new political identity. He listed grievances, a long, detailed indictment against King George III, building the case for revolution brick by brick. But a draft is just a draft. Once Jefferson submitted his work, it was time for the ultimate group project. And anyone who's been in one knows they can be intense. The entire Congress became an editing committee. For 2 days, they debated, scrutinized, and revised Jefferson's words. Imagine being Jefferson, watching your carefully crafted phrases get picked apart. He sat silently, fuming, as his colleagues made what he considered mutilations to his text. Benjamin Franklin, ever the wise observer, noticed his young friend's distress. He leaned over and shared a story about a hatter who wanted a sign with the words John Thompson. Hatter makes and sells hats for ready money, accompanied by a picture of a hat. Friends suggested edits until the sign was reduced to just the name John Thompson and the picture of the hat. The lesson was clear. Sometimes less is more, and group consensus requires compromise. The most significant edit was the removal of a long passage condemning the slave trade. It was a fiery accusation against the king for waging cruel war against human nature itself. However, delegates from South Carolina and Georgia, whose economies were deeply dependent on slavery, objected fiercely. Other northern delegates, who profited from the slave trade, also felt uncomfortable. To achieve unanimity, which was absolutely critical, the passage was struck out. It was a painful, pragmatic compromise, a paradox that would haunt the new nation for generations to come. The lofty ideals of all men are created equal were set down on paper, while the institution that directly contradicted them was allowed to persist. This decision highlights the complex, often contradictory, nature of this historical moment. As the sun beat down on Philadelphia on July 4th, the delegates continued their work. Line by line, word by word, they honed the document. They changed sacred and undeniable truths to self-evident truths, a subtle but powerful shift that made the ideas feel more universal and logical. They added a crucial phrase. Jefferson's original draft ended with a declaration that the colonies aren't of right ought to be free and independent states. The final version added an appeal to a higher power, inserting the words with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. This wasn't just a rhetorical flourish. It was a solemn acknowledgement of the immense risk they were taking. They were pledging their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to a cause that could very well fail, ending with all of them tried for treason. Finally, late in the afternoon, the debate ceased. The edits were complete. A vote was called to formally adopt this final version of the Declaration of Independence. The ayes carried the day. There was no grand ceremony, no immediate signing by all the delegates. In fact, most delegates would sign a beautifully engrossed copy nearly a month later. On August 2nd, on Julio 4 TH, the President of the Congress, John Hancock, and the Secretary, Charles Thomson, were the only ones to sign the initial printed copy. That evening, that version was sent to a local printer, John Dunlap. Throughout the night, he produced about 200 copies, known as the Dunlap broadsides. These were the first published versions of the Declaration, dispatched on horseback to the various colonies and to the Continental Army. Imagine General George Washington receiving one of these copies a few days later. On Julio 9 TH, he had it read aloud to his troops in New York City. For these soldiers, the words were not abstract philosophy. They were a profound motivation. They were no longer fighting for a redress of grievances against their king. They were fighting for the birth of their own nation. The news spread like wildfire. In towns and cities, bells rang, and crowds gathered to hear the words that proclaimed their independence. The Declaration was more than a legal document. It was a mission statement, a powerful piece of propaganda, and a promise of a new kind of government, one founded on the consent of the governed. The final words of the Declaration are a solemn vow. And for the support of this Declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. This wasn't hyperbole. The men who approved this document were now marked men, traitors to the British Crown. Had the revolution failed, the gallows awaited. They were placing everything on the line, based on the power of the ideas they had just adopted. They believed that liberty was a right given not by a king, but by a creator, and that governments existed only to protect that right. So, on July 4th, 1776, the final words were written not with a flourish of a quill in a quiet study, but through the fire of debate and the necessity of compromise. A new course was set. The Declaration of Independence was a bold gamble, an audacious announcement that a small group of colonies on the edge of a continent dared to invent their own future. It was an imperfect beginning, marked by contradictions that we still grapple with today. But it was also a profound expression of hope, a beacon of ideals that would inspire not only a revolution but also countless movements for freedom and equality around the globe. The story of its completion is a reminder that history is made by people who argue, compromise, and ultimately take great risks for what they believe in. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what part of this story surprised you the most. Until next time, stay curious. Hello and welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we arrive at a moment so powerful, so resonant, that its echo can still be felt centuries later. We're in Philadelphia. The date is July 8th, 1776. The air itself seems to be holding its breath, thick with anticipation and the humid summer heat. Just for days prior, a document was adopted that would change the world forever, the Declaration of Independence. But a document, no matter how profound, is just ink on parchment until its words are given voice, until its message takes flight and lands in the hearts of the people. This is that day. This is the story of the ringing heard round the world. Imagine yourself there, standing in the State House yard, which we now know as Independence Square. You're part of a massive crowd, a sea of faces from every walk of life. Shopkeepers stand next to farmers, artisans next to merchants. Children weave through the legs of adults, their eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and excitement. There are free black Philadelphians, recent immigrants, and families who have called this land home for generations. Despite their differences, they're all bound by a common thread of unease and hope. For weeks, whispers have turned into open debate. The tension with Great Britain has reached its breaking point. War is no longer a distant threat. It's a present reality. The question on everyone's mind is no longer if, but what now? The crowd murmurs, a low hum of speculation. What will be said? What does this declaration truly mean for them, for their families, for their future? They've heard rumors, of course. Talk of independence, of a complete and final break from the crown. It's a terrifying and exhilarating thought. For many, King George III is the only sovereign they've ever known. To declare themselves independent is to step into a vast, uncharted territory, an act of supreme defiance against the most powerful empire on earth. The risk is immense. The penalty for treason is death. Yet, the desire for liberty, for self-governance, burns even brighter than the fear. Then, a hush falls over the crowd. A man steps onto the wooden observatory platform, built a few years earlier by the American Philosophical Society to observe the transit of Venus. Today, it serves a different, more terrestrial purpose. The man is Colonel John Nixon, an officer of the Philadelphia Committee of Safety. In his hands, he holds a copy of the Declaration. His voice, clear and steady, cuts through the silence. He begins to read, "When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. With each word, the reality of the moment solidifies. This is not a petition. It is not a plea for reconciliation. It is a statement of fact, a declaration of a new reality." The crowd listens, captivated. Some faces are etched with stern concentration, others with dawning comprehension. The words are bold, radical. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Think about hearing those words for the very first time. All men are created equal. In a world structured by hierarchy, be birthright by a rigid class system. This was a revolutionary concept. It was a promise, an ideal to strive for, a foundation upon which a new nation could be built. As Nixon continues, listing the grievances against the king, the murmurs in the crowd grow. Nods of agreement, grunts of affirmation. These are not abstract complaints. They are shared experiences. The quartering of troops, the imposition of taxes without consent, the obstruction of justice, these are the very issues that have brought them to this precipice. The reading is long, and the sun beats down, but no one moves. They are bearing witness to the birth of their own nation. Nixon's voice rises as he reaches the final, powerful sentences. "We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states." A moment of stunned silence hangs in the air as the last word fades. It's the quiet before the storm. The finality of it all sinks in. Free and independent states. The bond is broken, the die is cast, and then, from the tower high above them, it begins, a single, deep, resonant tone. Bong. It's the State House bell, the one we now call the Liberty Bell. Its sound rolls out from the bell tower of Independence Hall, washing over the square. It's not just a bell. It's an exclamation point to the Declaration. It's the sound of a new beginning. The crowd, frozen for a heartbeat, erupts. The silence is shattered by a roar, a tidal wave of sound that seems to shake the very ground. It's a complex symphony of human emotion. There are joyous cheers, triumphant shouts that soar towards the sky. Men throw their hats into the air. Strangers embrace, united in this singular, momentous experience. There are also tears, tears of relief, after years of tension and uncertainty. Tears of joy, for the promise of a future they could shape themselves. Tears so fier, for the bloody conflict that was sure to follow. And there are prayers. Heads are bowed, hands clasped. People murmur words of thanks, of hope, asking for strength and guidance in the difficult days ahead. For them, this was not just a political act, it was a deeply spiritual one. They were invoking not just the rights of man, but the blessings of a higher power on their audacious endeavor. The ringing of the bell continues, each peal punctuating the celebration below. It's no longer just a summons or a signal, it has become a song. It's the anthem of a people claiming their freedom. Imagine the sound, not the clean, perfect tone of a modern recording, but the rich, complex, and slightly imperfect voice of a 2,000-pound bronze bell, ringing out over the brick and cobblestone of 18th century Philadelphia. It's a sound that carries over the rooftops, through the streets, and out into the surrounding countryside. It tells everyone within earshot, something has happened. The world has changed. This public reading and the accompanying celebration were not just a symbolic gesture. They were a crucial part of the revolutionary process. It transformed the Declaration from a political document into a public covenant. By cheering, by celebrating, the people in that square were giving their consent. They were ratifying the decision made by their representatives. They were personally, publicly, and emotionally investing in the cause of independence. That evening, the celebration continued. Bonfires were lit. The king's coat of arms was ceremoniously torn down from the State House and cast into the flames, a potent symbol of the rejection of royal authority. The city was alive with a revolutionary fervor. The sound of that bell had ignited a spark, and now it was a spreading fire. The story of the ringing on July 8th has, over time, blended with the story of the bell itself, the Liberty Bell, with its famous inscription, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land, unto all the inhabitants thereof," became the enduring symbol of this moment. While historical accounts confirm the bells of the city rang, the specific, dramatic tale of a young boy signaling an old bell to ring the Liberty Bell right after the vote on July 4th is more folklore than fact. The true, documented celebration, the one that united the leaders with the people, Apanaderi, on Julio 8. And it was this public proclamation, this shared experience of hearing the words in the bell, that truly marked the point of no return. The sound that echoed through Philadelphia that day was more than just vibrating bronze. It was the sound of defiance. It was the sound of hope. It was the sound of a promise being made, a promise of a government of the people, by people, and for the people. It was a promise that would be tested by war, challenged by internal division, and debated for centuries to come. The ideals expressed were not fully realized on that day. Slavery still existed, and women and non-property owners were excluded from the political process. The journey to live up to the words of the Declaration was just beginning, but every journey needs a first step. Every song needs a first note, and on July 8, 1776, in the heart of Philadelphia, that first note was struck, loud and clear, for all the world to hear. It was the ringing of a bell. Yes, but it was also the voice of a new nation, finding its courage and proclaiming its existence. It was the ringing heard round the world. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter of our story. It's these human moments, the sounds, the emotions, that truly bring history to life. If you found this story as moving as I do, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. Your support means everything and allows us to continue telling these vital stories. We'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our historical journey. Today, we delve into a sound that echoed through valleys, across plains, and into the very heart of a nation, a sound that was both a jubilant celebration and a solemn call to arms. This is Chapter 11, The Sound of Revolution. Imagine the year is 1776. The air in Philadelphia is thick with anticipation. Inside a stuffy room, a group of men has just made a decision that will alter the course of history. The Continental Congress has approved the Declaration of Independence. But how do you tell the world? How do you spread a message of such magnitude in an age without instant communication? You use a bell. Not just any bell, but a 2,000-pound bronze behemoth. we now know as the Liberty Bell. When that bell first rang out from the Pennsylvania State House, its pelly wasn't just noise. It was a message for the people of Philadelphia. It was a thunderous announcement of freedom, a declaration that they were no longer subjects of a distant king, but citizens of a new, self-governing nation. People poured into the streets, their faces a mixture of joy, relief, and perhaps a little bit of fear. The sound was a party starter. The first note in the symphony of American independence. It was the sound of a dream being spoken aloud for the very first time. But the bell's message traveled far beyond the city limits of Philadelphia. As news of the declaration spread, bells in towns and villages across the 13 colonies began to ring in solidarity. From the spires of Boston's churches to the small meeting houses in rural Virginia, a chain of sound connected the colonies. Each peal was an echo of the one before it, a testament to a shared purpose. It was the original social media notification, a viral signal that you were part of something bigger. It told a farmer in Georgia that a merchant in Massachusetts shared his hope for liberty. It told a blacksmith in New York that a lawyer in South Carolina was ready to stand with him. This network of ringing bells did more than just share news. It forged a sense of unity. Before this, the colonies were often seen as separate entities, each with its own identity and interests, but that coordinated ringing unified them. It was a collective voice, a chorus of defiance and determination. When you heard that sound, you knew you weren't alone. You knew that your neighbors, and people you'd never even met hundreds of miles away, were with you. This auditory bond was crucial. It transformed a collection of disparate colonies into a united front, ready to face the might of the British Empire. The sound told everyone, "We are in this together." However, the ringing of the bells carried a dual meaning. While it was a sound of celebration, it was also a grave and sobering call to arms. Every cheer for independence was underscored by the understanding that this declaration was not an end, but the beginning of a long and bloody war. That same bell that celebrated freedom also served as an alarm, a summons for ordinary men to become soldiers. It called them away from their farms, their shops, and their families, to fight for the ideals the declaration proclaimed. Think about the profound emotional weight of that sound. One moment, it's a symbol of pure joy and liberation. The next, it's a stark reminder of the sacrifice to come. For a young man hearing that bell, it meant he might soon have to leave his home, perhaps forever. For a mother or a wife, it was a sound of both pride and profound anxiety. The bell's peal represented the two sides of the revolutionary coin, the glorious promise of freedom on one side, and the terrible cost of war on the other. It was the sound of a nation being born through trial by fire. As the Revolutionary War raged on, the role of bells evolved. They became an integral part of the war effort. Their chimes signaled danger, warned of approaching enemy troops, and called the local militia to gather. A sudden, frantic ringing could send an entire town into a state of high alert. It was a primitive but effective alarm system that could mean the difference between life and death, between capture and escape. In this context, the bell was a guardian, its voice a shield for the community. But the bells were also vulnerable. The British knew their symbolic and practical importance. In cities like Philadelphia, patriots worried that the enemy would seize the bells and melt them down to be recast into cannons and ammunition. The very instruments that proclaimed liberty could be turned into weapons to suppress it. To prevent this, citizens took extraordinary measures. The Liberty Bell itself, along with 10 other bells from the city's churches, was secretly removed from Philadelphia. It was a daring act of preservation. Imagine the scene. The bells, symbols of public life and civic pride, being lowered from their steeples under the cover of darkness. They were loaded onto wagons and hidden beneath piles of hay and straw, then smuggled out of the city on a perilous journey to Allentown, Pennsylvania. They were hidden beneath the floorboards of the Zion Reformed Church for nearly a year, until the British threat had passed. This act shows just how much these bells meant to the people. They weren't just objects. They were the voice of their revolution, and they would protect that voice at all costs. Across the colonies, the sound of a bell became synonymous with courage. It took courage to ring it in defiance of the crown. It took courage to answer its call to arms. It took courage to hide it and protect it from the enemy. The bell was a constant presence, its sound weaving through the fabric of everyday life and the drama of the war. It celebrated victories, mourned losses, and called people to worship, all while embodying the central conflict of the era. After the war was won and independence secured, the bells rang out once more, this time in pure, unadulterated triumph. The sound that had once been a defiant hope was now a victorious reality. It filled the air of a new nation, a nation forged in the fires of revolution and united by the resonant call for liberty. The story of the bells is the story of the American Revolution in miniature. It's a story of communication, of unity, of the dual nature of conflict, and of the incredible courage it takes to build something new in the face of overwhelming odds. So, the next time you hear a large bell ring, take a moment. Listen closely. You might just hear an echo of the past, a faint, distant peal that carries the sound of revolution. A sound that was both a party and a prayer, a celebration and a call to arms, and the first, resonant voice of a new world. Thank you so much for joining me on this chapter of our story. If you found this journey into the past as fascinating as I did, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, stay curious. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our deep dive into American history. Today, we're uncovering a chapter that sounds like it's straight out of a spy movie, but it's 100% true. We all know the Liberty Bell, that iconic symbol of American independence. But what if I told you that for a crucial period during the Revolutionary War, this national treasure simply vanished? That's right. It went into hiding. Let's set the scene. It's 1777. The Revolutionary War is in full swing, and things are looking grim for the Continental Army. The British, led by General William Howe, have their sights set on Philadelphia, which was the acting capital of the fledgling United States. Capturing Philadelphia wouldn't just be a strategic victory. It would be a massive psychological blow to the American cause. Now, why would the British care about a big bronze bell? Well, it wasn't about silencing its symbolic message. It was all about resources. War requires weapons, and weapons require metal. The British had a well-known practice of melting down large metal objects, especially bells from churches and public buildings, to cast into cannons and ammunition. The State House bell, the one we now call the Liberty Bell, was a huge, tempting target, over 2,000 pounds of prime bronze. American patriots knew this. They couldn't let their symbol of liberty be turned into instruments of their own oppression. So, as the British Army advanced, a secret, daring plan was put into motion. The mission: get the bell, along with 10 other significant bells from the city's churches, out of Philadelphia before the British arrived. Imagine the tension. This wasn't a simple task. They had to lower this massive, fragile bell from its steeple in the State House, now Independence Hall. It was a delicate operation, done under the threat of an approaching enemy. One wrong move, and the bell could crack, its historic voice silenced forever. But they succeeded. Once it was down, the bell was loaded onto a heavily guarded wagon, part of a large convoy of farmers' carts carrying military supplies. To disguise its precious cargo, the bell was hidden under a pile of horse manure and straw. Think about that for a moment, America's future icon, buried under stable muck to save it from the enemy. The journey was treacherous. The convoy had to travel about 60 miles north to a small German-speaking town called Northampton Town, which we know today as Allentown, Pennsylvania. The route was rough, and they were constantly on the lookout for British patrols and loyalist spies. There's a famous, though likely embellished, story from this journey. The wagon carrying the Liberty Bell supposedly broke down in Bethlehem. The heavy bell had to be transferred to another wagon, all while trying to keep the operation secret from prying eyes. It's a detail that highlights just how precarious this entire mission was. Finally, the convoy reached the safety of Allentown. But where do you hide a 2,000-pound bell? The answer was in the basement of the old Zion Reformed Church. The bell was carefully lowered into the church's stone cellar, where it would remain hidden in the dark and damp for nearly a year. The pastor, a man named Abraham Bluma, and the congregation became its secret keepers. They went about their daily lives, holding a massive secret right beneath their feet. For 9 long months, from September 1777 to June 1778, the Liberty Bell lay silent in that Allentown basement. Above ground, Philadelphia was under British occupation. The Continental Congress had fled, and the war raged on. The winter at Valley Forge was brutal, a true test of the American spirit. But while the army suffered, the symbol of their fight for liberty was safe, waiting for the day it could be brought back into the light. That day finally came in June of 1778. The British, facing strategic challenges and the threat of the French entering the war on the American side, evacuated Philadelphia. The city was once again in Patriot hands. The secret mission was now reversed. The bell was retrieved from its hiding place in the church basement, loaded back onto a wagon, and began its journey home. When it was finally rehoisted into the steeple of the State House, it was more than just a bell. It had become a veteran of the war, a survivor. Its journey into hiding and its triumphant return mirrored the struggle of the nation itself, forced into the shadows, facing immense hardship, but ultimately enduring and re-emerging to reclaim its place. This incredible story, the bell's hidden years, adds such a rich layer to its history. It was unjust a passive object that happened to be in the right place at the right time to ring for independence. It was an active participant in the drama of the revolution, an artifact so important that patriots risked their lives to save it. It's a testament to the foresight and courage of those who understood that symbols matter, that the spirit of a nation can be embodied in an object, and that this spirit was worth protecting at all costs. So the next time you see a picture of the Liberty Bell, don't just see the crack. Remember the journey. Remember the straw and manure, the bumpy ride to Allentown, and the dark, quiet church basement where it waited, silently holding the promise of freedom until it could ring out once more. Thanks so much for joining me on this historical adventure. It's these hidden stories that truly bring the past to life. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell pun, and tend to so you don't miss our next story. See you next time. The dust of war finally settles, and the air, once thick with the smell of gunpowder and the cries of battle, begins to clear. A new day is dawning for the fledgling United States of America, and in this new dawn, a familiar, resonant symbol is making its journey home. After years of hiding, tucked away in the quiet safety of an Allentown church, the State House bell is returning to Philadelphia. But this is not the same bell that left. The journey, the hiding, the very passage of time have left their mark. The war, a crucible for the nation, was also a trial for the bell. Imagine the scene. A city rebuilding, its people bearing the visible and invisible scars of a long, arduous struggle for independence. The streets, once patrolled by foreign soldiers, are now filled with the hopeful, weary faces of citizens of a new republic. And through these streets, the bell is transported, not with the pomp of its initial arrival, but with a quiet, somber reverence. It's carried back to the State House, now known to all as Independence Hall, the very place where the destiny of a continent was debated and declared. As it's hoisted back into the steeple, the people who gather below can see it clearly. The journey and the years in hiding have not been kind. Scratches and dings mar its once gleaming bronze surface, but there's something more: a thin, jagged line, a fissure that has appeared on its surface, a crack. It's not the large, famous crack we know today, but a smaller, more subtle one, a sign of stress, a mark of the strain it has endured, much like the nation it represents. The bell that once pealed with a perfect, clear tone now carries a flaw, a scar. This cracked bell becomes a powerful, if unintentional, metaphor. It's a tangible reminder that freedom isn't pristine or perfect. It's something that must be fought for, protected, and sometimes it comes at a great cost. The bell is no longer just a herald of news. It's a veteran of the war, a silent witness to the nation's birth pangs. Its imperfection doesn't diminish its significance. It enhances. Italiano. It tells a story of resilience, of surviving a great trial, and of emerging changed, but whole. In the years that follow the revolution, the bell resumes its duties, but its voice is altered. The crack likely worsens with each ringing. It's called a poem to mark solemn occasions, to celebrate victories, and to mourn the passing of national heroes. With every toll, its slightly dissonant ring echoes through Philadelphia, a constant reminder of the fragility and the strength of their newfound liberty. The people of Philadelphia, and indeed, all Americans, begin to look at the bell differently. It's It's not just the State House bell anymore. It's their asterisk bell. This period is crucial in the transformation of the bell from a functional object into a cherished relic. It is during these post-war years that its story begins to intertwine more deeply with the story of America. The tales of its ringing on July 4th, 1776, whether entirely accurate or not, begin to cement themselves in the national consciousness. The bell, with its visible scar, becomes a touchstone for a generation that sacrificed so much. It's a connection to the monumental events they lived through. It's the sound of their revolution, the symbol of their survival. Think about the veterans of the war, men who returned home with their own scars. When they looked up at that bell, they must have seen a kindred spirit, a fellow survivor. It wasn't perfect, and neither were they. The new nation wasn't perfect, and they knew it better than anyone. It was a grand experiment, full of risks and uncertainties. The cracked bell perfectly encapsulated this reality. It represented a hard one, imperfect, but deeply precious freedom. The bell's physical state mirrored the political state of the Union. The Articles of Confederation were proving weak, the states were bickering, and the future was far from certain. The nation was, in a sense, cracked. It needed to be repaired, strengthened, and reforged, just as artisans would later attempt to repair the bell itself. The bell's journey back to Philadelphia wasn't just a physical return. It was the beginning of its journey into the heart of American identity. It sat in its tower, overlooking a city and a nation grappling with the immense task of building a durable republic. It had been hidden away, to protect it from being melted down by the British from munitions. Now, it stood as a testament to the fact that it had not been destroyed. The cause it represented had not been destroyed. It had been tested, stressed, and scarred, but it had endured. The return to Philadelphia marks the end of one chapter for the bell and the beginning of another. It's no longer just an instrument. It's an artifact. Its value is no longer just in its sound, but in its silence, in its very presence. The crack is not a sign of failure, but a badge of honor. It is the scar that proves the battle was fought and won. This is the bell that would be passed down to future generations, not as a perfect symbol of an abstract ideal, but as a scarred, cracked, and deeply moving reminder of the real, human cost of liberty. Thank you so much for joining us on this part of the journey. The story of this bell is the story of America, full of trials and triumphs. If you found this chapter as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. We have so much more to explore. See you in the next video. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're diving into one of the most iconic and mysterious features of a true American symbol, the crack in the Liberty Bell. We all know it's there, but have you ever wondered how it happened? Well, the truth is, nobody knows for sure, and that's where our story begins. The Liberty Bell wasn't always cracked. For decades, it rang out for significant events, its powerful tone echoing through the streets of Philadelphia. But somewhere along the line, a thin fracture appeared, forever changing its voice and its identity. This hairline crack, the one we see today, is the second one the bell suffered. The first time, it cracked right after arriving from England in 1752. Local metalworkers John Pass and John Stowe melted it down and recast it, but it seems the bell was destined for a bit of imperfection. So, when did the final, famous crack appear? That's the million-dollar question. There's no single, definitive record. No one wrote down, today, the bell cracked. It's a puzzle wrapped in historical whispers and conflicting accounts. The most popular and romantic story places the event on July 8, 1776. The tale goes that the bell was rung with such fervor to announce the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence that it cracked under the sheer joy and force of the moment. It's a beautiful thought, isn't it? A symbol of liberty breaking while proclaiming freedom. However, historians have largely debunked this. There's no contemporary evidence to suggest that the bell even rang on that specific day, let alone that it cracked. It's more of a patriotic legend that gained traction in the 19th century, a story we wanted to be true. Let's fast forward to the 1830s and 40s. This is when the bell, then known as the State House bell, started becoming a symbol of the abolitionist movement. They nicknamed it the Liberty Bell, and it began its transformation into the icon we know today. It's during this period that mentions of a crack start to surface. A widely accepted theory points to the funeral of Chief Justice John Marshall in July 1835. As the bell tolled in his honor, it's said that the crack appeared or significantly worsened. This account is more plausible and has more historical backing than the Declaration of Independence story. Imagine the scene. A solemn tolling for a great legal mind, and with each ring, the bell's own structure gives way. It's a poignant and dramatic moment, fitting for such a historic object. But there's another strong contender for the when-did-it-crack mystery. This story takes us to February 22nd, 1846. The city was celebrating George Washington's birthday, and the Liberty Bell was rung for the occasion. According to this account, the bell had a small, existing crack, and after hours of ringing, that small fissure suddenly expanded into the massive crack we see today. The ringing was immediately stopped, and after that day, the Liberty Bell never rang again. Public reports from that time describe the bell ringing for Washington's birthday and then falling silent, which lends a lot of credibility to this theory. They even tried to repair the crack in 1846 by drilling along the fracture and inserting rivets, hoping to stop it from spreading. This repair attempt, known as the stop drilling method, is what created that distinctive jagged line we see. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The bell was silenced forever. So we have several possibilities. A legendary crack from 1776, a solemn crack from 1835, or a final, silencing crack from 1846. What does this mystery tell us? It shows that sometimes history isn't about exact dates and times. It's about the stories we tell and the meanings we attach to objects. The crack, an imperfection, didn't diminish the bell's importance. In fact, it made it even more symbolic. It came to represent the nation itself. Flawed, fractured, yet enduring. The bell couldn't ring anymore, but its silence spoke volumes. It became a visual symbol of liberty. Its crack a reminder of the fragility of freedom and the constant effort required to preserve it. The imperfection became its most perfect feature. The journey of the Liberty Bell's crack is a fascinating piece of American folklore and history. From its casting, its recasting, to its final, silent state, the bell's story is one of resilience. The crack isn't a sign of failure. It's a battle scar. It's a physical manifestation of a long history. A reminder that even broken things can hold immense power and meaning. The mystery of when it happened only adds to its allure, inviting us to look closer, to question, and to appreciate the imperfect, complex, and beautiful story of our past. What do you think? Which theory about the crack seems most likely to you? Let me know down in the comments. I love reading your thoughts and theories on these historical mysteries. Thanks so much for joining me today on this journey into America's past. If you enjoyed this video and want to explore more stories like it, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next adventure. Until next time, stay curious. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into a fascinating story of transformation, exploring how a simple bell, cracked and retired, became one of the most powerful symbols in American history. This is the story of how the Liberty Bell went from a functional tool to a profound national emblem. So, let's set the scene. For the first several decades of its existence, the State House bell was just that, a bell. Its job was to call lawmakers to assembly, announce public meetings, and mark important events. It was a utilitarian object, a piece of city hardware. If you told someone in the 1780s that this bell would one day represent the very soul of the nation, they'd probably have looked at you a bit funny. It had its famous inscription, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land." But this was seen more as a hopeful, biblical quote rather than a political mission statement. It did its job, ringing for major events like the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence. But it wasn't yet the Liberty Bell we know today. The real shift begins in the 19th century, and it's a slow, almost accidental process. The bell's first major crack appeared sometime in the early 1800s, and it was officially silenced after a final, fatal crack developed in 1846 while ringing for George Washington's birthday. Now, you'd think a broken bell would be destined for the scrap heap, right? But this is where the story gets interesting. Its retirement from service was the single most important thing that ever happened to it. No longer just a functional object, the bell was now a historical artifact, a relic from the time of the Founding Fathers. This is where the abolitionist movement comes in. In the 1830s, anti-slavery societies were searching for powerful symbols to galvanize their cause. They needed something that connected their fight for freedom to the nation's founding ideals. In 1835, an abolitionist publication from New York, the Anti-Slavery Record, featured an illustration of the bell, possibly the first time it was used in this context. But the real turning point was in 1839, when another abolitionist group in Boston published a pamphlet titled The Liberty Bell. They seized upon that inscription, "Proclaim liberty." For them, this wasn't just a historical quote. It was a divine command, a moral imperative that the nation had failed to fulfill. They brilliantly repurposed the bell's image. They pointed to this silent, cracked bell and said, "Look, this is a symbol of our nation's broken promise. It proclaimed liberty, yet millions are held in bondage. The bell is silent, just as true liberty is silent in our land." This narrative was incredibly powerful. It framed the fight against slavery not as a radical new idea, but as a fulfillment of America's original, and as yet unrealized, promise. The name Liberty Bell began to stick, spread through pamphlets, poems, and speeches. It is a perfect example of how a symbol's meaning can be redefined by the people. The abolitionists took an object, gave it a new name, and imbued it with a powerful story that resonated with the core values of the nation. The crack itself became part of the symbolism of visible flaw, representing the nation's deep division over slavery. As the 19th century progressed, this new identity for the bell solidified. After the Civil War, the bell's journey from a tool to a symbol was nearly complete. The war had been fought, in many ways, over the very definition of liberty that the abolitionists had championed. The bell now stood as a silent witness to that struggle and its resolution. It became a symbol of unity, a reminder of the price of freedom and the long, hard road to achieving it. To cement this new status, the bell went on tour. Starting in the late 1800s, it was carefully transported across the country by train, visiting cities from New Orleans to Chicago, from Atlanta to San Francisco. Imagine the scene. Thousands of people, many of whom were children of immigrants or formerly enslaved individuals, gathering at train stations just to catch a glimpse of this bronze icon. For them, it wasn't just a bell from Philadelphia. It was a tangible piece of American history, a direct link to the ideals of 1776. Touching the bell was like shaking hands with the Founding Fathers. These Liberty Bell tours were a stroke of genius, transforming a local relic into a truly national treasure. It brought the story of liberty directly to the American people, binding the nation together through a shared symbol. With each stop, its legend grew. Stories, some true and some embellished, were told and retold. The tale of it ringing on July 4th, 1776, while not historically accurate, became a cornerstone of its mythos. It didn't matter if it was perfectly true. What mattered was the idea it represented that the bell was present and participating in the birth of the nation. By the dawn of the 20th century, the transformation was complete. The State House bell was gone, and in its place stood the Liberty Bell, an undisputed and revered symbol of American freedom, patriotism, and the ongoing struggle to live up to the nation's highest ideals. It became an icon used in civil rights movements, women's suffrage campaigns, and protests for peace. Its image was everywhere, a constant reminder of the simple yet profound idea inscribed on its surface. So, the next time you see a picture of the Liberty Bell, remember its incredible journey. It's a story about how meaning is made, how a broken object can become a powerful symbol, and how the fight for liberty can give a voice to even the most silent of things. It teaches us that symbols aren't static. They are shaped and reshaped by each generation's hopes, struggles, and dreams. The bell's story is, in essence, the story of America itself, flawed, resilient, and always striving to proclaim liberty throughout all the land. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical journey today. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the symbols and stories that shape our world. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next video. We'll see you next time. Have you ever wondered how a cracked bell became one of the most powerful symbols of freedom in American history? It's a story that goes deeper than just a simple crack. Today, we're diving into Chapter 16 of our series, focusing on the incredible story of the abolitionist movement and its connection to what we now call the Liberty Bell. Let's rewind to the 1830s. The United States was a nation deeply divided. The institution of slavery was tearing the country apart, and a powerful new moral and political force was rising to challenge it. The abolitionist movement, these were men and women, black and white, who believed that slavery was a stain on the nation as soul and a gross violation of human rights. They were writers, preachers, activists, and everyday citizens who were ready to fight for a cause they knew was just. Now, think about the State House bell in Philadelphia. By this time, it was already old, already cracked, and largely forgotten. Its original purpose was to call lawmakers to their meetings. But its inscription, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof," taken from the book of Leviticus, held a powerful, untapped meaning. For years, this message had been symbolic, referring to a specific kind of biblical liberty or the freedom of the colonies from Britain. But the abolitionists saw something more. They looked at that inscription and saw a promise that had not yet been fulfilled. How could America claim to be a land of liberty when millions of its inhabitants were held in bondage? The abolitionists were masters of communication and symbolism. They needed a way to capture the public's imagination, to create an icon for their struggle. And there, sitting silently in Philadelphia, was the perfect symbol. In 1835, the New York Anti-Slavery Society's journal, The Liberator, published a pamphlet featuring a powerful image of the bell. This was one of the first times it was explicitly linked to the anti-slavery cause. They didn't call it the State House Bell. They rebranded it. They gave it a new name, a name that would echo through history, the Liberty Bell. This was a stroke of genius. By renaming the bell, they reframed its entire narrative. It was no longer just a relic of the colonial era. It was now a living testament to the unfulfilled promise of American freedom. The crack itself became a potent metaphor. To many, it represented a nation broken by the injustice of slavery, a flaw in the very fabric of the country that needed to be mended. Abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison used the bell as a rallying cry. They printed its image on their publications, spoke of it in their speeches, and invoked its message of universal liberty. The bell's inscription wasn't just about political freedom from a king anymore. It was about the fundamental human right to be free from ownership by another person. The inhabitants in the inscription, they argued, meant all asterisk inhabitants, not just a select few. This reimagining of the bell was incredibly effective. It transformed an object into an idea. The Liberty Bell became a symbol of the moral crusade against slavery. It was a constant, tangible reminder of the hypocrisy at the heart of the nation. It asked a silent but profound question to everyone who saw it. What does liberty truly mean? Throughout the 1840s and 1850s, as the debate over slavery intensified and the country edged closer to civil war, the Liberty Bell's status as an abolitionist icon grew stronger. It was featured in poems, songs, and stories, all centered on the theme of emancipation. It was no longer just Philadelphia's bell. It belonged to the movement. It belonged to every person who dreamed of a day when the promise of liberty would finally apply to everyone. What's so powerful about this story is how it shows that symbols do you want to have a fixed meaning. Their power comes from the stories we tell about them. The abolitionists didn't just adopt a symbol. They breathed new life into it. They took an old, cracked bell and made it ring with a new, urgent message of freedom for enslaved Americans. They ensured that whenever we look at the Liberty Bell today, we don't just see a piece of metal from the 18th century. We see a symbol of a long, hard-fought struggle for justice. The sound of the bell might have been silenced by its crack, but its message, amplified by the voices of the abolitionists, became louder and more powerful than ever before. It's a reminder that true liberty isn't a given. It must be constantly fought for, expanded, and proclaimed for all. The legacy of the abolitionists' work is profound. They fundamentally changed the moral landscape of the United States and set the stage for the Civil War and the eventual emancipation of millions. By claiming the Liberty Bell as their own, they ensured that the fight for freedom would forever be intertwined with one of America's most cherished national treasures. It is a powerful lesson in how movements can harness the power of history to shape the future. And that est, the incredible story of how the abolitionist movement gave the Liberty Bell its name and its enduring purpose. It is a testament to the power of a great idea and the people who are brave enough to fight for it. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical journey today. If you found the story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. We'll see you in the next video. Have you ever wondered what happens when a national treasure goes on a road trip? Or rather, a rail trip? Today, we're diving into a fascinating, often overlooked chapter of American history. The time the Liberty Bell left its home in Philadelphia and traveled across the entire nation. This isn't just a story about a big piece of metal. It's a tale of healing, unity, and the incredible power of a symbol. Let's set the scene. It's the late 1800s. The Civil War has been over for a couple of decades, but the wounds are still raw. The country is struggling to piece itself back together, to truly feel like the United States again. People are searching for common ground, for something that everyone, North and South, could rally around. And what better symbol of American ideals than the Liberty Bell? The idea was bold, maybe even a little crazy. Take this priceless, famously cracked artifact and send it on a massive tour by train. The goal was simple yet profound: to bring a tangible piece of shared history to the people, to remind them of the founding principles they all cherished. It was a traveling mission of peace and patriotism. The first major trip kicked off in 1885, heading to the World's Industrial and Cotton Centennial Exposition in New Orleans. Imagine the logistics. The bell, weighing over 2,000 pounds, was carefully mounted on a specially designed, lavishly decorated railroad car. It was like a patriotic float, a shrine on wheels, chugging its way through the heart of the former Confederacy. And the reaction? It was nothing short of astonishing. As the Liberty Bell train rolled through towns and cities, something magical happened. The journey itself became the event. At every stop, from small rural depots to bustling city stations, enormous crowds gathered. We're talking thousands upon thousands of people, all waiting for a glimpse of this icon. The train would slow down or stop, and people would surge forward. They came from all walks of life: farmers, factory workers, veterans from both sides of the war, school children waving little flags. They weren't just there to look. They wanted to connect. People reached out, desperate to touch the cold bronze, as if to physically grasp the ideals of liberty it represented. For many, this was the first and only time they would ever see such a significant piece of their nation's history. Newspapers of the day described incredible scenes. In Sommetones, the entire population would turn out. Church bells would ring, local bands would play patriotic tunes, and parades would escort the bell through the streets. Speeches were made, celebrating reunion and a shared future. It was a national spectacle, a rolling celebration of American identity. Children were a huge part of this. Teachers would bring their classes to see the bell, explaining its significance. For these kids, born after the Civil War, the bell wasn't a relic of a divided past, but a promise of a united future. They would press their small hands against the famous crack, their faces filled with awe. These moments were powerful, creating a new generation of Americans with a shared memory, a shared experience centered on this single object. The tour to New Orleans was so successful that it sparked a series of other journeys over the next 30 years. The bell traveled to Chicago for the World's Columbian Exposition in 1893, to Atlanta in 1895, to Charleston in 1902, and even all the way to the West Coast for expositions in San Francisco and San Diego in 1915. Each trip was an adventure. The train crossed vast prairies, navigated treacherous mountain paths, and rolled through landscapes that were still wild and untamed. Along the way, it continued to draw incredible crowds. People would wait for hours, sometimes in the pouring rain or blistering sun, just for a moment with the bell. They brought flowers to lay on its platform and souvenirs to remember the day. These tours were more than just a traveling museum exhibit. They were a brilliant act of public relations for the nation itself. In an age before television or the internet, this was how you brought a message to the masses. The message was clear: we are one country. Remember what we stand for. It helps stitch the nation back together, thread by thread, town by town. Think about the veterans of the Civil War. Men who had fought against each other just years earlier now stood united in their reverence for the bell. It was a symbol that transcended their past conflicts. It reminded them of the revolution that created their nation, an ideal that was bigger than the divisions that had torn them apart. It was a moment of collective healing, played out on 1,000 railroad platforms across America. However, the constant travel began to take its toll. Experts worried that the vibrations from the train and the constant handling by crowds could worsen the bell's famous crack. There were fears that the treasured artifact might shatter completely. The 1915 trip to the West Coast was its last major journey. After that, officials decided the risk was too great. The bell returned to Philadelphia for good, its traveling days over. But the impact of its journeys lasted for generations. For millions of Americans, the Liberty Bell was no longer just a picture in a history book. It was a real, tangible thing they had seen with their own eyes, touched with their own hands. It had visited their town. This created a personal connection to the nation's story in a way that nothing else could. The great American rail tours of the Liberty Bell are a testament to the power of symbols to unite people. It was a brilliant, heartfelt effort to mend a broken nation by reminding its citizens of their shared heritage and the enduring promise of liberty. It was a bell that didn't just proclaim freedom from a tower in Philadelphia. It traveled the country to deliver that message personally. What a story, right? It really makes you think about how we connect with our history today. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories you thought you knew. Let me know in the comments what other historical journeys you'd like to explore. See you next time. Hello, and welcome back to our series. Today, we arrive at the final chapter of our journey, the Liberty Bell today. After centuries of travel, turmoil, and triumph, where does this iconic symbol of freedom reside now, and what does it mean to us in the 21st century? Let's find out. If you were to visit Philadelphia today, you'd find the Liberty Bell in a modern, purpose-built home, the Liberty Bell Center, located in Independence National Historical Park. It's a far cry from the dusty, crowded steeple of the Pennsylvania State House, where it first hung. The center was specifically designed to give the bell the prominence it deserves, creating a space for reflection and education. Entering the Liberty Bell Center is an experience in itself. You walk through a series of exhibits detailing the bell's incredible history, from its casting in London to its role in the abolitionists and womenist suffrage movements. These displays set the stage, reminding you that you're not just looking at an old piece of metal. You're about to encounter a witness to American history. And then you see it. At the end of the hall, framed by a massive glass window with Independence Hall in the background, stands the Liberty Bell. It's a powerful and beautifully staged view, connecting the bell directly to the building where the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution were debated and signed. This visual link is no accident. It's a constant reminder of the ideals the bell represents. The bell itself is no longer mounted for ringing. Its famous crack, a symbol of its beautiful imperfection, makes it too fragile. It hangs from its original yoke, made from American elm, though now supported by a modern steel structure to ensure its preservation. It is silent, yet its message has never been louder. The bell that once called lawmakers to their duties and citizens to public readings now calls to the conscience of the nation. Millions of people from all over the world visit the Liberty Bell each year. They come for different reasons. Some are tourists, checking off a musty landmark. Others are on a pilgrimage, seeking to connect with the founding principles of the United States. You see school groups learning about civics, families taking photos, and individuals standing in quiet contemplation. The atmosphere is one of reverence. People speak in hushed tones, as if in the presence of something truly sacred. The silence of the bell is, in many ways, its most powerful feature. It forces us to stop and think, what does liberty mean today? The inscription, proclaim liberty throughout all the land and to all the inhabitants thereof, is a call to action that continues to challenge us. Are we living up to that proclamation? Have we extended liberty to asterisk? all asterisk inhabitants. The bell's silence invites this personal and national soul. The National Park Service, which manages the site, does an incredible job of presenting the bell's complex history. They don't shy away from the fact that when the bell first proclaimed liberty, that liberty did not apply to enslaved people, to women, or to many others. The exhibits acknowledge these paradoxes, presenting the bell not as a perfect relic of a golden past, but as an enduring symbol of a struggle for freedom that is ongoing. It represents an ideal we are still striving to achieve. This is what makes the Liberty Bell so relevant today. It's not a monument to a finished story. It's a symbol of a promise of a more perfect union. Its crack can be seen as a metaphor for the divisions in our society, but also as a testament to resilience. Despite its fracture, it endured. It found a new purpose, a new voice, not through sound, but through symbolism. Think about how many times you've seen the image of the Liberty Bell. It is on currency in logos, and used by countless movements fighting for justice and equality. It has been adopted by civil rights activists, suffragists, and advocates for freedom around the globe. Its image travels far beyond the walls of its Philadelphia home, carrying its message of hope and perseverance. When you stand before the bell, you're standing in a long line of people who have done the same, each bringing their own hopes and dreams for freedom to that spot. You feel a connection to the past, to the abolitionists who saw it as their symbol, and to the suffragists who used its image to demand the right to vote. You also feel a connection to the future, to the generations who will come after us and continue the work of liberty. The Liberty Bell Center itself reflects this mission. It's an accessible, open space. You don't need a ticket to see the bell. It is free for everyone. A truly democratic monument. On any given day, you'll hear dozens of different languages spoken by visitors, a testament to its universal appeal. The idea of liberty, after all, knows no borders. Its journey from a functional bell to a national treasure has been long and extraordinary. It survived a fire, was hidden from the British, traveled across the country, and became a powerful tool for social change. Today it rests, but it does not sleep. Its silence is a canvas onto which we project our highest aspirations. It asks us questions. What does liberty mean to you? How are you proclaiming it in your own life, in your own community? The bell's story is a reminder that history is not static. Symbols evolve. Their meanings deepen and expand over time. The State House bell became the Liberty Bell because people decided it should be. They imbued it with meaning, and through their actions, they made that meaning real. Its power doesn't come from the metal it's made of, but from the ideas we attach to it. And so, as we conclude our deep dive into the story of the Liberty Bell, we leave it in its modern home, safe and silent, but more influential than ever. It is a tangible link to our past, a mirror for our present, and a beacon for our future. It is a symbol of our nation's beautiful, imperfect, and ongoing journey toward liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical exploration. It has been an honor to share the story of this incredible American icon with you. If you've enjoyed this series, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, stay curious. Ever stood in front of the Liberty Bell? It's massive. It's historic. But what everyone really looks at is the crack. For years, we've heard the story. It cracked when it was rung to celebrate the Declaration of Independence, or maybe later for Washington's birthday. We see it as a flaw, a beautiful object that's broken. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if that crack isn't a story of failure, but the most important part of its story? Today, we're going to dive deep into Chapter 19 of its history, not one from a dusty book, but one we're writing right now, the meaning of the crack. Let's reinterpret this iconic symbol, not as damaged goods, but as a profound metaphor for the very thing it represents. Liberty itself. Think about it. We often imagine freedom as this perfect, unbreakable ideal. But the bell tells us something different. It suggests that liberty is fragile. It's on a solid, indestructible monolith. It's something that can be stressed, strained, and even fractured if not handled with immense care and respect. The crack is a permanent, visible reminder that our freedoms are not guaranteed. They require constant vigilance, maintenance, and a gentle hand. When the bell was first cast, it was meant to be perfect. But its journey was messy. It was recast. It cracked. It was silenced. Doesn't that sound familiar? The journey of America, the journey of any nation striving for freedom, has never been a straight line. It's filled with conflicts, struggles, and moments where the very fabric of society seemed ready to split apart. The crack represents those struggles. It embodies the fierce debates of the founders, the Civil War that nearly tore the nation in two, the long and arduous fight for civil rights, and the ongoing arguments we have today about what freedom truly means. It's the physical scar of a difficult birth and a challenging life. It tells us that building a free society is hard, often painful work. But here's the beautiful part. The bell wasn't thrown away. It wasn't melted down and forgotten. Instead, it was preserved, crack and all. And in that act of preservation, its meaning was transformed. It became more than just a bell. It became a symbol of resilience. Resilience is the ability to withstand hardship and bounce back. The Liberty Bell, in its beautiful imperfection, is the ultimate emblem of that. It shows us that you can be damaged and still stand. You can bear the marks of your past struggles and still have a powerful voice. In fact, its silence is now louder than its ring ever was. It doesn't need to make a sound to proclaim its message. The crack does the talking. It whispers to us about the fragility of democracy. It reminds us that progress is not inevitable, and that the rights we enjoy were fought for by people who faced incredible odds. They were people who saw the cracks forming in their own societies, and worked tirelessly to mend them, not by erasing the damage, but by strengthening the structure around it. This imperfection makes the bell more relatable, more human. A perfect, gleaming bell might represent an unattainable ideal, but a cracked bell, that's something we can all understand. We all have our own cracks, our own scars from the battles we've fought. We've all felt broken at times. Yet, we endure. We find new purpose. We become stronger not despite our imperfections, but because of them. The bell's imperfection tells a deeper, more honest story. It's a story that acknowledges that the pursuit of liberty is messy and imperfect, just like us. It challenges the polished, sanitized version of history and presents a more truthful narrative. One of struggle, survival, and enduring hope. So, the next time you see an image of the Liberty Bell, or if you're lucky enough to see it in person, don't just see the crack as damage. See it as a storyteller. See it as a teacher. It's teaching us that freedom isn't a gift that's simply given. It's a precious, fragile thing that must be carefully nurtured by every generation. It's a symbol that our nation, and our own lives, can be imperfect and whole at the same time. The crack is not a sign of weakness. It is the mark of its strength, a testament to what it has endured. It's the very thing that gives the Liberty Bell its profound and lasting meaning. It's a reminder that the most beautiful things are often those that have survived being broken. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey to reinterpret a classic American symbol. If this gave you a new perspective, I'd love it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we arrive at the final chapter of a story cast in bronze and steeped in freedom. The tale of the Liberty Bell. We've seen it journey across oceans, witness the birth of a nation, and crack under the weight of its own joyous proclamation. For over a century, its physical voice has been silent, a quiet sentinel in the heart of Philadelphia. But does that mean its song has ended? Let's stand for a moment in the presence of this icon. Look at that famous crack, a jagged scar that tells a story of passion and imperfection. It's a flaw that, ironically, has made it perfect in our eyes. This bell, ordered to celebrate the 50th anniversary of William Penn's Democratic Charter, was destined for greatness from its very inception. Its inscription proclaimed liberty throughout all the land, unto all the inhabitants thereof. Wasn't just a biblical quote, it was a prophecy. When it first arrived from London in 1752, it cracked on the very first test strike. A bad omen. Perhaps, but the colonists of Philadelphia were a resourceful bunch. Local foundrymen, John Pass and John Stowe, melted it down and recast it, not once, but twice, adding copper, to make it less brittle. Their names are stamped proudly on its surface, a testament to American ingenuity and the refusal to accept failure. This new bell rang out, calling lawmakers to their meetings, summoning citizens to hear the news, and marking moments of both sorrow and celebration. Imagine the streets of Philadelphia in the 1770s. The air is thick with tension and revolutionary fervor. This bell wasn't just an alarm clock for politicians. It was the heartbeat of the city. While the popular legend of it, ringing on July 4th, 1776, is more folklore than fact, its true moment of glory came on July 8th. On that day, its powerful peal summoned the people to the State House yard for the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence. Can you hear it? The clanging of bronze, the cheer of the crowd, the birth of an idea that would change the world forever. The bell wasn't just announcing news, it was announcing a new reality. Throughout the Revolutionary War, the bell was a symbol of the cause. When the British threatened to capture Philadelphia in 1777, the bell was spirited away, hidden beneath the floorboards of a church in Allentown. The revolutionaries knew its symbolic power. To let it fall into enemy hands would be a devastating blow to morale. They understood that it was more than just metal. It was the voice of their struggle. After the war, it continued to serve, but its time was running out. Years of ringing took their toll. The final, fatal crack appeared sometime in the 1840s. The most widely accepted story is that it cracked while tolling for the funeral of Chief Justice John Marshall in 1835. In a last-ditch effort to repair it for George Washington's birthday in 1846, workmen widened the thin crack to stop it from spreading, creating the iconic fissure we see today. They rang it one last time, but the crack splintered further, and the bell fell silent forever. But did it really? A physical object can break. A sound can fade. But an idea is eternal. In the years that followed, the silent bell became an even more powerful symbol. Abolitionists adopted it as their emblem, calling it the Liberty Bell and pointing to its inscription as a call to end slavery. For them, the crack represented a nation divided, a promise of liberty not yet fulfilled for all its inhabitants. The bell embarked on a new journey, not on a wagon to Allentown, but on trains crisscrossing the nation. From Chicago to New Orleans to San Francisco, it went on tour, uniting a country healing from a civil war. Millions of Americans, many of whom had never left their hometowns, came to see Italiano. They touched its cold, bronze surface and connected with the founding principles of their nation. It was no longer just Philadelphia's bell. It was America's bell. During the women's suffrage movement, a replica called the Justice Bell was forged, its clapper chained to its side, silent. The suffragists vowed it would not ring until women had the right to vote. When the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920, the Justice Bell rang out in triumph, echoing the spirit of its silent predecessor. In the 20th century, the Liberty Bell's message went global. During the Cold War, its image was used as a powerful symbol of freedom, in contrast to the tyranny behind the Iron Curtain. Its chime, though silenced, was heard in the hearts of those fighting for democracy around the world. Every protest for civil rights, every vote cast in a free election, every time a journalist speaks truth to power isn't that the bell ringing. And that brings us to the heart of our final chapter. The ring that never fades. The Liberty Bell no longer rings in Independence Hall. You cannot hear its tone with your ears, but its sound, its true sound, was never just the vibration of bronze. Its sound is the echo of Jefferson's words in the Declaration. It's the echo of Lincoln's promise of a new birth of freedom at Gettysburg. It's the echo of Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, proclaimed on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. The bell rings. It rings in the courage of a young activist standing up for what is right. It rings in the quiet dedication of a teacher educating the next generation about their rights and responsibilities. It rings in the verdict of a jury that chooses justice over prejudice. It rings every time a new citizen takes the oath of allegiance, their voice joining a chorus that began over 2 centuries ago. The Liberty Bell is silent, yes, but it is not quiet. Its inscription was a command: proclaim liberty. And we are the bell ringers now. We are the inhabitants of the land, tasked with ensuring that its promise extends to all. The physical bell may be a relic, A beautiful, broken piece of history. But its spirit is alive, a sound that resonates, not in the air, but in our actions. The ring never faded. It simply transformed. It became the soundtrack of freedom itself, a perpetual chime in the soul of humanity, echoing eternally. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible historical journey. If you found this story as inspiring as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the symbols that shape our world. We'd love to have you in our community. Until next time, keep listening for the echoes of history.